a long time for this data to come in. Actually, John Rawls was an American economist around the turn of the 20th century who was also a philosopher, and he had this theory that he thought that Hume and Kant were probably both partially correct. He thought, you know, it's probably more complex than one or the other. It's probably that we have some emotional, part of our moral sense, or a moral compass, some people like to say. And it's probably also true that we apply reason to come to our moral decisions. And there's a gentleman now, his name is Mark Hauser. He's quite popular. A lot of you have probably heard of him. He's at Harvard. And he was really intrigued by this. He thought, you know, Rawls is probably onto something. I think it is a multifaceted capacity that humans have. So, and in fact, he took it further because he was interested in, if any of you know who Noam Chomsky is a linguist. And he argues about this deep grammar he talks about. It's this theory he has where humans have an unconscious capacity, so we don't have to think about it, which gives us the ability to sort of determine whether grammar is correct or not. So he uses an example. He says, if I were to say to you, the colorless dream sleeps furiously, okay? The sentence is rather nonsensical, right? But without having to think about, well, there's a subject, there's a verb, we already knew that it made sense from a grammatical perspective. So Chomsky said, there are these, we have capacities that we're not aware of, that they just sort of, the brain somewhere from the back just spits out answers for us so that we don't have to think about it. So Mark Hauser, this guy at Harvard says, you know, there's probably an emotional factor, there's probably a factor of reason, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's also, like our capacity for grammar, some sort of underlying unconscious faculty, some sort of evaluative system that just spits out answers for us, ooh, that's bad, or oh, that's okay, without even having to think about it. So, but he's challenged now. So how am I going to prove this? It makes sense to me. How are we going to figure out whether it's true or not? So I apologize. I'm going to drag you through some trolley problems. I know some of you are going to roll your eyes, but it has to be done. So Mark Hauser said, okay, well, I can survey people. Here's what we'll do. He put a survey online, and there are some very famous trolley dilemmas that were started by a philosopher by the name of Philippa Foot. And he says, okay, and 5,000 people went through the survey. So he said, okay, here's the first dilemma. Think about this. Imagine that you are a bystander by a train track, and you see a train, you know, running out of control. The engineer is slumped over the steering mechanism, and the train is just out of control. And ahead down on the track, you see 5 train track workers. And you can tell that if nothing happens, if the train isn't stopped, they'll be killed. Then you notice as well that ahead of the train, but before the workers, is an alternate track. And you see a switch before you where you can throw the switch and divert the train to the alternate track, which would prevent the 5 workers from being killed. Right? Now, obviously, it seems very simple at this point. You throw the switch. But then to make it a little more complicated, there's a lone hiker on the alternate track. Okay? So you have 2 options. Either you stand by and watch, and 5 workers will be killed, or you throw the switch, and 1 lone hiker will be killed, and the 5 will be saved. Now, I can tell you right now, if we did a show of hands, who thinks it's okay to throw the switch, 90% of you will say yes. And somewhere between 10 and 12% of you will say, no, I'd rather just stand by and watch, even though it means a net loss of 4 lives. So that was fine. So the interesting thing was that 5,000 people answered this, and he specifically made sure that they were people of different cultural background, different religions, different languages spoken, different birthplaces. He purposely made sure that this was as cross-cultural as he possibly could. Okay? 90% of the people answered the same thing. Yes, throw the switch because 5 live, 1 dies. Okay, let's change it then. Again, there's a train running down the track. It's out of control. 5 workers are ahead. Only this time, you're standing on a bridge. There's no alternate track. And you could stop the train by dropping a very heavy weight in front of it. However, the only very heavy weight is a very large man standing beside you. So, you have a choice to make. Do you stand by and watch the 5 workers down the track get killed, or do you push the very large man off the track, or off the bridge to his death to stop the train? The result is you will have a net gain of 4 preserved lives. Now, in this case, 87% of people said, no, you may not do that. You may not push a man to his death just to stop the train, even though the net gain will be 4 preserved lives. So Hauser says, well, this is odd, because 90% of people said, yes, 5 saved, 1 lost. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. But then you change the scenario, and all of a sudden, almost 90% say, no, you can't do that. Doesn't matter if the greater good would be 5 lives versus 1. You just can't do that. So he sort of mulled over this and realized, yeah, there's definitely a multiple component structure to our moral sense, because if it was all from one source, then we would consistently make, decisions that were, that were consistent. Obviously, that's a bit redundant. So one of his colleagues, Joshua Green, got hold of this information, and he said, well, we can test this further. If it's true that our moral sense is a multifaceted piece, if it's true that you suspect it's probably emotion and it's probably also reason, then we can do what the psychology students are doing across the hall. They have this fMRI machine, which allows them to do real-time brain scans. They roll the people into this machine, and what the psychology students do is they show them, frightening pictures, and they watch the brain and see, oh, okay, that part of the brain lights up. All right, when we scare them, this part of the brain becomes active, and we show them something sad, okay, that part of the brain becomes active. So the psychology people have been mapping out what areas of the brain become active under certain conditions. So Joshua Green says, well, let's take this theory you have and test it. Let's do the train dilemmas on. Ask people to go through these while we're watching what's happening in their brain. So what happened was exactly what they expected. They scanned people and they asked them, okay, scenario 1, all right, you can throw a switch, you can divert the train, you'll kill 1, but you'll save 5. 90% of the people said, yes, I would do it, I would throw the switch, and the activity they saw in the brain was a portion of the brain. Now, for the sake of technicality, I'll give you the name of it. It's called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. What that really means, basically, both to me and to you, is it's the part of the brain that's essentially associated with cost-benefit analysis. It's basically, okay, gain of 1, gain of 5, okay, that means this goes. So they've proven, all right, so we definitely use reason for some moral decisions at least. That we can see. All right, well then let's find out then what's happening in the brain when we do this second trolley experiment. Why is it so many people disagree that we can throw the man off the bridge? So again, they start wheeling people into the fMRI machine, and they give them the problem, will you push the big man off the bridge? And they say, no, I won't do it. This time, far deeper in the limbic system, okay, again, for technicality, I'll say it, the medial prefrontal cortex lights up, shows a lot of activity, which is essentially associated with social emotions. So they've noticed now, okay, when we ask them to throw a switch and collateral damage will occur, they use cost-benefit analysis. They use the reason part of the brain. When we ask them to push somebody to his death, all of a sudden they have this big emotional reaction. So now, I would call it proof. You may say strong evidence. I would call it proof that given the specific type of moral dilemma that we're faced with, we're motivated by different parts of our intellectual sort of makeup. Not even our intellectual, our cognitive as well as our emotional.